Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Pull up close to the fire tonight, friends. It's a warm one, but the dark is deep, and what we've got to share deserves the kind of quiet only a fire can make. I'm Mottie Shepherd, and this is Campfire Stories.
And I'm Carol, and I'll just say, I've been thinking about tonight's story all day, and I already have a lump in my throat, so you're all warned.
Carol and I met in a university film studies class, as some of you know, and the very first book we ever argued lovingly I'll say, was a slim little novel from 1937 by a Californian named John Steinbeck, Of Mice and Men. Less than 120 pages. It has ruined more people in less time than almost anything else ever put on paper.
Our professor handed it out on a Tuesday, and by Thursday half the class looked like they hadn't slept. I remember thinking, how does something this short do that much damage?
It's a Great Depression story, set in the Salinas Valley of California, which Steinbeck knew the way a man knows the back of his own hand. Two men traveling together, looking for ranch work. George Milton, small, quick, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who notices everything. And Lenny Small, which is about the funniest surname Steinbeck ever gave anyone, because Lenny is enormous. Strong as a draft horse, and gentle as a child, because in most of the ways that matter, that's what he is.
And right away you feel the thing between them. It's not just friendship, it's something older than that. George looks after Lenny the way you look after someone who has nobody else in the world, and Lenny looks at George like he's the whole map.
They've got a dream, these two. Lots of people in the Depression had dreams, mostly as a survival tool, something to reach for when the present was too hard to look at directly. George and Lenny's dream is a few acres of land, a little house, some rabbits for Lenny to tend, and the right to say we work for nobody but ourselves. George recites it like a bedtime prayer, and Lenny asks to hear it again and again. You get the feeling Lenny doesn't entirely understand it. He just knows it makes him feel safe.
That detail, Lenny asking to hear it again, that's what I come back to every time. He's not holding on to a plan. He's holding on to the sound of George's voice telling him everything's going to be all right.
They land on a ranch outside Soledad, which means solitude in Spanish, and Steinbeck did not pick that word by accident, and they fall in with a crew of men, each one carrying his own quiet sadness around. There's Candy, the old swamper, missing a hand, terrified of being turned out when he's too old to be useful. There's Crooks, the black stable hand, kept separate from the bunkhouse, living in the barn with the horses, because that's the kind of country it is, and that's the kind of time it is. And there's Curley, the boss's son, small, mean, and looking for a fight, and Curley's wife who has no name in the whole novel, which is one of the things that should keep you awake at night.
She's the loneliest person on that whole ranch, and nobody lets her forget she doesn't belong anywhere comfortable. I always want to rewrite her a way out every time.
The trouble, when it comes because of Lenny's one great weakness. He loves soft things, mice, puppies, anything that fits in his hands and feels gentle. He doesn't mean any harm. He never means any harm. But he doesn't know his own strength, and he panics when things go wrong, and when Lenny panics, soft things stop being soft.
Marty, I have read that book 5 times, and every single time I think, maybe this time it goes differently. And every single time Steinbeck reminds me who's in charge of this story.
Curley's wife finds Lenny alone in the barn one afternoon. She lets him touch her hair. She just wants company, just wants someone to talk to, and when Lenny holds on too long and she pulls away frightened and starts to cry out, he panics. He holds on tighter, trying to quiet her, the way you'd try to keep a puppy from wriggling. And then she's still. And Lenny has done the worst thing, the thing that can't be walked back from, without a thought in his head that was ever cruel.
There's a scene in the 1939 film Lon Chaney Jr. as Lenny, Burgess Meredith as George, where Chaney plays that moment and the look on his face is just pure bewildered grief. He knows something terrible has happened. He doesn't entirely know what.
Lon Chaney Jr. deserved every award that year and got almost none of them, which is a whole other campfire for a whole other night. George finds out what's happened before the ranch hands do. He knows what's coming for Lenny. Curley is already talking about making it slow, making it hurt. And George makes a choice. He finds Lenny out by the river, in the willows where they had agreed to meet if anything ever went wrong. He sits down beside him, and he tells him the story one last time. The little house. The acres. The rabbits Lenny will tend. He tells it slow, and Lenny closes his eyes, and George does the merciful and devastating thing.
I have never been able to decide if that ending is an act of love or an act of grief, or both at once, and I think that's exactly where Steinbeck wanted me to stand.
Both. It's always both. The 1992 version, Gary Sinise directed it, played George himself, John Malkovich as Lenny. Sinise said he'd wanted to make that film since he was a young man doing the play in theater. And you can feel it. He filmed the ending with such care, such stillness. No score swelling up to tell you how to feel. Just the river and the willows and two men who loved each other in the plainest, most durable way there is.
Gary Sinise never got enough credit for that film. He understood that it wasn't a tragedy about what Lenny did. It was a tragedy about what dreams cost the people who carry them for somebody else.
That's the thing Steinbeck put in the title, really, and I don't think everyone catches it right away. He took it from a Robert Burns poem, "The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang aft egly, go often wrong," it means. The plans of small creatures and large ones alike are undone by forces they can't see coming. Burns wrote it about accidentally plowing up a mouse's nest in a field. Steinbeck said, yes, and also this. Also George and Lenny. Also every person who ever had a small, tender, reasonable dream and watched the world plow right through it.
You know what gets me every time I think about that Burns poem in this context? The mouse didn't do anything wrong either.
No. No, it didn't. And neither did Lenny, not in any way that was ever his fault. That's the weight Steinbeck puts in your hands and doesn't take back. Some stories don't give you a villain to blame, and those are the ones that stay the longest because they ask harder questions. Not who was evil here, but what do we owe each other when the world is this hard and this indifferent? George's answer was everything. Right to the end.
We had a friend in our film studies cohort, lovely man, Tom, big reader, and he said Of Mice and Men was the first book that made him feel like literature was for him. Like stories weren't just decoration. Like they were trying to hand him something true. I think about Tom when I think about this book.
Steinbeck knew something about those ranch hands, those Okies, those men who drifted across California with nothing but each other and a story they told themselves before sleep. He'd been there with them. He'd listened. And then he sat down and wrote something so human and so spare that it's been on banned book lists almost every year since it was published, which tells you everything you need to know about how close it gets to the bone and how nervous the truth makes some people.
Banned for language mostly, but I always thought they were really afraid of the tenderness. A big tough man who loves rabbits and asks to hear the same story every night that apparently makes people nervous.
Tonight, friends, if the fire has done its work, you'll carry George and Lenny home with you, not as a lesson, not as a warning, but as a reminder. That the most durable thing two people can share isn't property or ambition or even safety. It's the story they tell each other in the dark. The one that says, I see you. I'm here. Someday things will be different. Even if someday never comes, the telling matters. That's what Steinbeck knew. That's what he put in 112 pages and handed to the world. I'm Marty Shepard.
Sleep warm, friends? And if someone you love asks you to tell them the story one more time tonight, the dream, the plan, the someday tell it slow,